Today we're going to talk about a topic that many in the community have been clamoring for. Why the heck do narcissist exes always seem to breadcrumb? Really though, we're combining two concepts together with this discussion. That of the narcissist, someone who thinks so highly of themselves that they believe others are inferior, often lacking empathy for their partners, and that of breadcrumbing, a tactic used by exes or people where they do just enough to make you think they are interested in re-pursuing a relationship with you, to keep you on the hook, so to speak. However, usually that ex hasn't decided whether they want to pursue you romantically just yet. They're just keeping their options open. Now, often what I find is that breadcrumbing seems to be a favorite tactic of narcissists in the post-breakup period. You are here to find out why, and I'm here to give you that answer. So why the heck do narcissists love to breadcrumb? Well, our journey first starts by understanding the narcissistic abuse pattern, which is outlined in a very beautiful graphic that you can see on your screen here from Sir Thrive Tribe. Basically, there are 4 stages to it: the idealized stage, the devalue stage, the discard stage, and the hover stage. Now, the idealized stage, basically, it's this point in time where the narcissist is showering you with gifts, adoration, love, attention, etc. Then comes the devalue stage. The admiration that was once present, well, it's now gone, replaced with cruel tactics to devalue you as a human being. Cruel remarks disguised as jokes. Often the stage isn't complete until the victim has lost most of their self-esteem. Then you have the discard stage. The victim's usefulness has ceased. They break up with you. They cut all ties. They find a new woman or man to replace you. And then that's followed by the hover stage. This is an attempt to draw you back in. Maybe their new supply, their new woman or man just isn't doing it for them anymore. So they come back to Old Faithful. And the best way to convince you to come back, well, that lies in the idealized stage. And around they go. Now, fundamentally, my goal with ex-boyfriend recovery is to really help and heal men and women. Therefore, I'm all about helping the victims caught in this cycle break out of it. More on that in a minute. You're here because you're trying to figure out why narcissist exes breadcrumb. Well, there's really 2 answers to this, and they're based on where you are in that cycle that I just talked about. So if you're in a relationship with a narcissist, then likely they'll be breadcrumbing in the devalue phase. This is because they are unsure whether or not they want to fully let the relationship go. So while they're devaluing you, they have these little moments of doubt where they throw in a breadcrumb or 2. Now, if the narcissist has broken up with you, then likely they'll breadcrumb you in that discard phase. This is where they're deciding whether or not they can replace you. Just in case they can't, guess what? You'll be the backup. Now, last year, I spent most of that year furiously writing about avoidant attachment styles. You can just take a look around the YouTube channel and kind of figure that out. So when I was researching for this specific discussion and I stumbled across the narcissist cycle, it sort of took me aback. The horrible narcissist cycle looks eerily similar to my avoidant death wheel. So could it be true that a narcissist equals an avoidant? Well, I found that not to be the case. However, no narcissist is considered as having a secure attachment. Instead, they'll be insecure, anxious, avoidant, or fearful. And yet, one look around our community and you'll see many of our members diagnose their avoidant exes as narcissistic. Why? Well, most of our clients, I feel, misdiagnose their exes as narcissistic when they're simply avoidant. Now, I'm actually going to pull from an article I wrote a few years ago when talking about how to truly spot a narcissist. So there's actually a difference between someone who simply has narcissistic tendencies and someone who has a narcissistic personality disorder. The fact that the term narcissist gets thrown around more than hashtag these days is kind of telling. The difference between having narcissistic tendencies and actually being a narcissist is the number of standard narcissistic tendencies that the subject displays. But who determines these standards? Well, that would be the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders, or the DSM. The 5th edition of the Diagnostic and Statistic Manual of Mental Disorders lists the same 9 criteria for narcissistic personality disorder as did the previous version published 19 years early. So these are the characteristics of narcissists. Number 1, they have a grandiose sense of self-importance. Number 2, they're preoccupied with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. Number 3, they believe that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or should associate with other special or high status people or institutions. Number 4, they require excessive admiration, regularly fishes for compliments, and is highly susceptible to flattery. Number 5, has a sense of entitlement. Number 6, is interpersonally exploitative. Number 7, they lack empathy. They're unwilling, or I would add unable, to recognize or identify with feelings and needs of others. Number 8, they're often envious of others and believe that others are envious of them. Number 9, they're arrogant, haughty, rude, and abusive towards you. But perhaps the best way to differentiate an avoidant from a pure narcissist is by looking at the one major difference between the two graphics that I'm talking about. Remember, with the narcissistic abuse cycle, there are 4 main stages: the idealized stage, the devalue stage, the discard stage, and the hover stage. And with the avoidant death wheel, there are 8 main stages. I don't really want to go through them again. At a glance, these two graphics appear in lockstep, but there is one major difference. Generally, as an avoidant going through the death wheel graphic, they aren't going to exhibit the devalue stage in a harsh way. They'll simply become more distant towards the end of a relationship. So while it's true that almost every narcissist is going to have an insecure attachment, that what you typically find is that they're especially cruel during that devalue stage. So let me sum it up for you a bit better. If you put a narcissist in the death wheel graphic, your anxious side doesn't really trigger them in the same way it would an avoidant. Rather, they devalue you, they chew you up and spit you out, showing no empathy along the way. Now this, to me, is where I think our community makes a mistake. They confuse narcissistic tendencies with narcissistic personality. This may sound kind of ridiculous, but if you actually look at the 9 characteristics of narcissists, you might look at them and think, I might actually exhibit a few of these. Well, newsflash, everyone does. I mean, who hasn't been preoccupied from time to time with fantasies of success or ideal love? It's human. Where I think the misunderstanding takes place is that a narcissist is going to exhibit most of the tendencies on that list. Most of us don't lack empathy. Narcissists do. Most of us don't act arrogantly. Narcissists do. There's often no negotiation with them when it comes to that list. And this leads us to the final point that I'd like to make. What's a secure way of handling a narcissist? Well, one of the reasons that I love attachment theory so much is due to the fact that it can serve as a guiding light to not only understanding why exes act a certain way or why people act a certain way, and that includes narcissists, but it also serves as a guiding light on how to handle them. So I'd actually like to point to the devalue stage because that's where the narcissist ends up doing the most damage. Not many people really know how to handle it. They think they do, but when it comes down to it and it's actually happening to them, they freeze up. Ultimately, the devalue stage in a relationship is the equivalent to a hostile response from an ex after a no-contact rule. The advice on how to handle narcissistic behavior and hostile responses is the same. Acknowledge the behavior, set a boundary, exit the conversation. I'll give you an example. Let's say that your ex texts you something incredibly rude, something that is in line with the devalue stage in the narcissistic abuse cycle. The correct way to respond to this kind of a text is, "It appears you are angry. I'm sorry you feel that way. However, I'm not going to allow you to speak to me that way." And then you leave the conversation. So you acknowledge the behavior. It appears you are angry. I'm sorry you feel that way. You create the boundary. I'm not going to allow you to speak to me that way. And then you exit the conversation. You actually exited the conversation. This simple formula only works if you can actually create the consequence of leaving. And that's the part everyone always messes up on. Narcissists tend to be drawn to people pleasers, and creating a consequence is a very un-people pleaser thing to do. But do it, you must.